truth and reality, folks, you're all getting distracted 200 or 300 times a day. It's the subtle advertisements being used. It's the fact that, yes, it's not a joke. Your phone is listening to you, and it is sending advertisements and targeted things to you.
Good morning, everybody. Cowboy here. We have Veles, the Dark Raven of the Deep State. Veles, how you doing, sir?
Just fine.
Awesome. We got a little bit different of a format today. This is a pre-recorded episode, although it's pretty much being released not long after it's been recorded. And Veles, I know you always have stuff stacking up for like a week or two before you get started. So we've been really eagerly anticipating another Veles show, and we always do. We always love your shows. Take a look in the description here before we get started. We got a couple of goodies for you. We have our sponsor, Algo Factory. We have a free algo in there. Check that out. It's a cool video. You get to see the algo being built, get to see it turned into code, to see how I do that. And then you get to see how traders, once they have optimized for the trading, can connect that algo to their broker so it can trade without them being at the computer. So you're playing golf or sleeping or whatever it is that you do when you're not trading at the computer. So Veles, always good to have you on, sir. What do you have for us this week? I know it's been exciting, to say the least.
It's been exciting, especially if you trade silver. And my thanks as always to Algo for the air support. And as he said, we're pre-recording this because we were not able to do a live program as I often do. So thank you for listening. A couple of housekeeping items. The first is today's program, in case you didn't catch this on Discord or not on Discord. We have a very brief Finders Keepers update, a hello to friends in Canada. The California billionaire tax is spreading to other states with some frightening considerations. Status check on all things who have not happened, but we're supposed to by now. Davos and various forms of employment are meeting soon in Switzerland. Some clarity on ESW Rogue content and the alternative space. Why the recent food pyramid change is important. Specific data on data center impact to future power availability in the grid. Patrick Ryan points the way again. And power projections by the U.S., which are far more serious than most people realize, as well as some final thoughts. And as Algo said at the opening, please check out the links for his content at algofactory.tech. And please also visit Gus Demos at perpetualassets.com to round out your financial options. My normal weekly reminder, if you need to reach me or have thoughts on programs and or you would like access to Discord, please send me an email at 1917VELES 1917Veles@gmail.com. So with that, there'll be no Veles program on January 23rd. I'm traveling domestically and unable to host that week. So regarding Finders Keepers, these are the folks that are in court against the FBI and are seeking answers from the FBI about whether or not they dug up missing Union gold up in Pennsylvania. There are no updates on the court case. I did double check just to make sure nothing had popped up. By February 4th, we should have an update, and I'll be sure to cover that when we get there on the calendar. Shout out to Sue and Steve up in Canada. My thanks for your nice note early in January. Keep warm up there, my friends, and my best to the whole family. Eric Von Daniken, as many of you know, Eric Von Daniken passed away Sunday, January 11th at the age of 90 in Switzerland, his home country. For those of you who know, you know. For those of you who do not, it's worth familiarizing yourself with his background. I personally spoke with Von Daniken twice in my life, once at a small Kentucky university where he gave a talk around 1999, and the other at the 2012 Paradigm Symposium. He was always the first to acknowledge which of his theories or hypotheses had adjusted over the years due to new data. That's something you'll see with modern academia. He gave birth to many alternative and amateur archaeologists, as well as analysts who've contributed to the field, and you cannot put a price on the value of what he did. Even if you disagree with all or some of his theories, he dared to ask what if. At a time who invited such violent pushback, he logically had to be onto something. May Anubis grant you passage to the next world, Eric, and we thank you for all that you did for us. Another passing, Scott Adams, mentioned Scott's worsening health on my last program, and unfortunately we lost him on Tuesday of this week. There have been two items about his passing I wanted to touch upon. Some of you may have seen the posts on X or similar where there were descriptions of an obituary for a dead terrorist leader compared to how Scott's obituary was written. Words like conservative activist, reactionary, Trump supporter, and racist, and a host of other things. That's funny because I recall he was a cartoonist for decades before he expressed his political views. Second, several people keep harping on his recommending people get vaccinated when the coup first began. I would point out he stated several times that he was wrong about that and felt misled by the government, among others. To me, it's a distraction from the important comments he made about structures used in society to control us. For Scott as well, safe passage to the other side, and thank you for all you did, not just the humor, but the esoteric beliefs that you held. California tax. So we've more detail on the proposed tax on billionaires in California. California's state government is considering a one-time 5% tax on billionaires residing in California as of January 1st, 2026, with payment in 2027. So now the big reveal. What's that money to be spent on? Officially, the money goes into a dedicated account of which 90% of those funds are to be spent on healthcare services for the public. The other remaining funds are to be spent on food assistance and education. In my book, that means aid to the foreign national migrant population in California. Let us also not forget the scandals regarding other such special accounts where no one can find the money. These would include, but are not limited to, the money set aside after the January 2025 Palisades fires, the building of California's high-speed rail line, that's $100 billion, the $37 billion in homeless relief, and $500 million to stop raw sewage from Mexico reaching California's shores. Those monies are missing with no accounting for what happened. Not to be outdone, the state of New York says they're considering the same form of tax with the election of the new mayor. But wait, Veles has more. Guess what's been discovered about California's proposed tax on total wealth? It includes strange provisions if the stock you own gives you voting authority on companies. This rather than just being a stockholder. Granted, these are problems most of us rarely have if we own stock. When you're a Silicon Valley bigwig or similar, though, it's not uncommon that voting shares of stock you own are of sufficient percentage that you essentially control the company. Under those circumstances, the way the proposed law in California is written means you're taxed on the value of the company because they treat it as though the company is yours. Well, when you have companies worth hundreds of billions, that can mean your tax bill could literally be in the billions. It's not embellishment to say in certain business articles the following has been said. If this tax begins accumulating January 1st of this year and is payable in early 2027, those California citizens are leaving the state immediately. I'd do the same thing, and so would you if you faced a similar problem. Stay tuned as we find out how many people end up leaving the state. There are concerned California officials saying such a reality caused by departures of so many high net worth people would destroy what's left of California's tax base. With or without this 5% tax, much of the state's tax revenue relies on that segment of California society. Gavin Newsom on Tuesday loudly stated he'll stop that tax from passing. This does not mean California will not pursue something like it. And we always have to remember this is a classic head fake potentially. You say that you're going to pass this very aggressive tax, you don't pass it, but then you do pass something that's similar. Being Veles, this is also an opportunity, and I'd like to point out to California's departing billionaires and high net worth citizens your many choices. Don't just run off to Florida, Texas, or even Wyoming like your predecessors. I would like to remind each and every high net worth Californian seeking an exit strategy to consider your many options. Seriously, you would be welcomed with open arms to central or northern Michigan, the state of Indiana, Ohio, western Pennsylvania, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas, among others. I mean, with your level of wealth, many of you could literally own 50% of Iowa, and we'll throw in one senator and a few congresspeople while we're at it. Plus, you don't need to pay for these fine state government officials. They're included in the purchase price of several counties in any of these states. Any of you could easily own Southwest Indiana, and we'll throw in the Navy's munitions storage silos in that part of the state for free. You all own your own jets, so it's not like you wouldn't be enjoying the rest of the United States at your leisure. Plus, with your kind of economic impact, I can safely say don't even bother paying state taxes once you move. You'll create so much revenue by simply living in our states. We'll be happy to waive your state taxes. Did you accidentally run over your neighbor and kill them in your Bentley? Not a problem. That's a mulligan. You don't need to appear in court if that happens again. Just a thought to my friends in California. Run, do not walk. On the private chat among us at Rogue, which includes Algo, myself, V, Gus, and others, Gus offered the following a few days ago, and I thought, well, okay, I'll take a look. Holy crap, folks, I got to tell you, run, do not walk, and watch the program who's titled Who Really Runs the World by Peter McCormick, who interviews Simon Dixon. It's like a Rogue program, including Matthew Arrett and Tom Luongo all rolled into one with a sprinkle of Veles. Dixon absolutely nails his worldview and his model, and you really need to review that program on YouTube when you have a chance. Gus Demos on Wednesday, January 14th. Speaking of Gus, if you didn't hear his program yesterday, please do give it a listen. All of us at Rogue, including Gus, have been chatting a lot since New Year, and a lot of what Gus covered on the 14th was from those conversations. His descriptions of the gated communities in South America hit home for me as I've seen the massive disparity in those countries. Status check. Just a reminder, Anthony Fauci, of whom we have mountains of disclosures about him and a book who details his crimes at a prosecutorial level, is still free, nor is there any known intention to call him back for hearings or similar, much less prosecute him. I suppose now is a bad time to remind us he testified previously without being sworn in, meaning even if he lied, to quote every New Jersey mafia guy, what are you going to do about it? They screwed up the prosecution of obvious fraud and misconduct by Fulton County, Georgia Attorney General Fani Willis. We still have no investigations into what occurred during the coup, even if your concern is solely did the government manage it correctly. Never mind the public's ability to use FDA Rule 320 to avoid being compelled to take inoculations. All this fraud has come to light, including USAID, who was some time ago. Where are the prosecutions? Heck, just give me a grand jury. How's the audit of Fort Knox coming along? And here's a piece of the whole gold conversation concerning Fort Knox everyone forgets about. All of the gold of the United States is not sitting in Fort Knox. There are other sites who hold our gold, including West Point's Mint in New York, the Denver Mint in Colorado, the Fed Bank in New York. It's a little bit of a head fake on that topic, folks. We don't need to just audit Fort Knox. We need to audit all of them. Annual meetings. Just a reminder, the Davos, Switzerland World Economic Forum annual meeting is scheduled for Monday, January 9th to Friday, the 23rd, which would be next week. As usual, I'm sure on the back page of the news will be coverage of a lack of sex workers being available because of so many high net worth people all being in one spot at one time in their private jets. Interestingly, there's been some press coverage of the fact many members of the U.S. administration are attending. According to those same sources, the U.S. is attending to finalize with Davos what the new system will be, at least when it comes to where the U.S. is going to hold influence. We will see. By the way, I would also point out, I mentioned on Discord, basically from the 17th this Saturday through Sunday the 18th to the 19th, a lot of astrological and numerical significance to those dates. So just keep your eyes open and watch yourselves. I point that out because it's also when the Davos meeting begins. Aliens on the White House lawn. Haven't used that jingle in a while. Definitely need to bring it up as there's a lot of chatter out there, all of whom it could go in any direction. The net being so much fighting is going on among the apex elites about the new economic order. The one thing they agree on is distractions. Could be anything. Jesus Christ returns, the ninth Mahdi, or aliens. So if you see aliens on the White House lawn or you hear about aliens coming up from the oceans, you're being played. Public service announcement. Let me pull the bus over for a moment and speak from the heart on this one. I picked up some concerns from messages I've received, whether from emails or DMs, and I do read those, and I do genuinely listen, so let me offer some clarity. The first item is, pardon my colleagues and my frustrations at times, as even we get worn out by world events as much as you do. I'm referring to some of our content around the time of the military operations in Venezuela. Second, I'm aware frequently people are seeking answers as much as solutions in our content. Our focus among many is we're working to provide you with data about the current state of things. No matter what the solution, tool, or approach, all of those things are useless if you're not operating from accurate information. Third, yes, there are times pointing out the degree of the lies in many aspects of our lives can be unsettling. Our intention is not to alarm or worry anyone, but to point out how very deep that rabbit hole goes. Messages who in and of themselves can be upsetting, and I acknowledge that. Fourth, as much as the system is using algorithms to study us to sell us more stuff, they also study what rattles us. I've noticed a bit more arguing on our Discord site of late, and while I welcome genuine discussion, let's remember we're all on the same team. Let's not make disagreements personal on Discord. I feel like we're being forced into arguing with one another, and let's not let the bots manipulate us. Fifth, in the end, all of us must identify what we're trying to do and accomplish in life and plan accordingly. The data we and others provide is to help you with that planning. Your life planning doesn't need to be complicated. Equally, don't beat yourself up for not buying Bitcoin at $100, why you didn't overthrow the government of Bolivia when you had a chance, and why you didn't store a ton of silver in your basement starting 20 years ago. We're often just in the bleachers watching this insanity, folks. To reference C.S. Lewis' excellent book, The Screwtape Letters, the tempter demons often talk of filling human beings with noise so they cannot focus, to deny them the divine grace of God and the harmony of heaven. An excellent reminder to get away from all the noise in our lives. Take a long walk, go to the gym, go take a drive and leave the radio off and the cell phone at home. We all just need to shut down sometimes and get some exercise. Crazy Days and Nights felt one of the recent posts was worth discussing. Around January 9th, the site posted the following, and I quote, "This foreign-born A-list model got involved with the mafia guys through the dead billionaire. It's also how she knows that some models never made it home and that some of the customers didn't either," unquote. The belief by fans of that website is Naomi Campbell's association with Jeff Epstein is what is the backstory of that post, which is more than possible. What caught my attention was the latter half of the post. Yes, sadly, women and men caught up in these sex compromises can succumb to several demons, including drugs. What caught my attention was the reference to customers of Epstein's not returning alive. Based on my experience, that would not necessarily occur because you didn't pay your bill to Epstein. It was because you could have compromised the entire operation or to set an example of you to the rest of the blackmail population of targets. That's worth thinking about. Ergo, not everyone involved with Epstein wanted to be or didn't try to get out. Dopamine weaponization. In the 1980s, officials from Nintendo appeared in front of the US Congress about their dominance in video games. This is an item I've shared previously, that during those hearings, a question was posed about the games using light and sound to reward the player the further they advanced in games like Mario Brothers. One could say it was a dopamine reward to the game player. Nintendo officials acknowledged that was part of the game's design because there's no law in Japan saying you can't do that. Of course, it's important to point out there's no law in the United States preventing such a thing either. We've discussed on Rogue the use of dopamine rewards and the massive weaponization, and it is, with all forms of smartphones. If you wanted to send your human bot armies to battle one another, wouldn't you do it through dopamine reward systems and groups? I'm speaking not just of Minnesota, but a number of other events we've seen the last few years. At the same time, anything who distracts a person from these dopamine reward systems is violently opposed. That would include things like a positive religious experience, personal meditation, and cutting back on electronic stimulation, much less being sure to exercise and take long walks. Occult. Straight up from Donut at the Donut Factory, what does the word occult mean in general? It means hidden. Many of us in the alternative community have dabbled at a much higher level in esoteric aspects of the world we live in because that's the belief system of our apex elite friends. Some of these hidden aspects are things we often don't think of. Case in point, because a particular company may have some occult things associated with them, but we don't make the connection. An interesting example from Donut is the In-N-Out Burger hidden menu. They're not the only company that has a hidden menu. But pause for a moment and consider this. Why would you even have a hidden menu in the first place unless you're trying to convey something? Just a thought. AI and popular culture. In the 9th episode of season 19 of South Park was an episode titled Truth and Advertising. The episode aired in December of 2015, which is now slightly more than 10 years ago. The net of that episode is advertisements have become self-aware and taken on human form. A group of newsmen are trying to stop them as advertisements have cut them out of influencing the public. The newsmen grab one of the kids because he can see through the advertisements and not be affected by them. There's a rather spooky moment where they have him speak to a young girl classmate, and he walks out of the room and looks at them and says, "Does she know she's an ad?" There's a ton of symbolism and insight in the episode, who in my world was about artificial intelligence. The popular culture TV show Entertainment Tonight had a segment when the movie E.T. came out in 1982 who focused not on the movie but something else. The fact there was so much product placement throughout the film. Various snack chips, sodas, and other products turned and facing the camera in such a way the film was a giant advertising mechanism without your awareness. More than 40 years later, AI has now built profiles on all of us to tailor everything in our lives who is media related, not just consumer products, but ideas and our opinions. At one point in the episode, the self-aware advertisement named Leslie says words to the effect, "You'll never win. Every time you find a way to block us, we'll only become stronger and more effective." Power consumption planning. Zero Hedge ran an article on Tuesday, January 8th about how data centers accounted for 40% of PJM capacity costs in the last auction. That all sounds very serious, but what the heck does that mean? Well, the first thing is PJM stands for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland interconnections, who were the three states who formed that power pool in 1927. Today, the PJM organization operates in 13 states. They're one of the largest regional transmission organizations for power in the United States. These capacity auctions that PJM conducts are to ensure there will be enough power generation available for 3 years in the future to meet demand, including peak operation. It's a forward contract to purchase power from power plant owners and guarantees the needed power is available over those next 3 years. Why 3 years in advance? Because power plants' maintenance schedules are very complex and they need time to plan them. Also, if new generating capacity needs to come online and then determine current versus future capacity needs. Importantly, these auctions is the fact that whatever the peak figure is, they add 20% more capacity just to make sure there's no surprises 3 years later. The mix of power types being generated included the following: 43% from natural gas, 21% from nuclear power, 20% from coal, 4% hydro, 2% wind, 2% oil, and 1% solar. There was also 5% of what they call demand response, and that's when they pay customers to use less power during peak periods. Data centers are part of that demand response piece given their proportion of power usage. To come full circle, 45% of the estimated power needs are data centers, and that's immense. At the same time, remember, those are projections of power who have not been realized. That's a tricky game. Will the data centers, in fact, need that much power or not? We're justifying power grid builds over the next 3 years based on those figures. The food pyramid. There's more with this topic than may first appear. During the week of January 5th, the U.S. government adjusted the food pyramid. To many health food-minded folks, this was welcome news as it essentially moved away from filler or bulk foods like grains and gave greater emphasis to proteins and fats. In another of those moments where we chuckled and then that cold chill goes over us, noting South Park again, there was an episode with a similar focus, essentially turning the food pyramid upside down and telling the public. In one scene in the animation, an FDA official says, "Get me the president, he has to know." All joking aside, there's more going on here than at first meets the eye. South Park once again is providing the narrative in advance and conditioning the public for those who watch the program. I swear we've lived long enough that the scene from Men in Black has become reality. I'm referring to the scene where they're reading tabloid newspapers to learn the latest of what's actually going on in the world. Around the time of the Battle of Hastings and changes in Europe's social structures, something else happened. The new feudal societies changed the diet of the average person. In such notable examples like England, all land in England belonged to the king. That means any tree, stone, rabbit, deer, or similar belongs to the king. Your taxes were essentially levied because the king granted you the right to live where you were living on the king's land. This also meant if you killed wild animals as part of your diet, you took the king's property without license. something for which you could be imprisoned or worse. This is also why English common law during these periods, you were also responsible for paying your own imprisonment. The more you can afford, the better your imprisonment. Because, say it with me, you're in the king's prison for violating the king's law and you need to pay because the king certainly isn't going to. Essentially, this is why penal colonies like Australia were set up for people who couldn't pay their taxes or afford their own imprisonment. Returning to the food topic, game meats were therefore reserved for the king and the king's elites in feudal society. Even if you raised your own livestock, you still owed the king taxes on your protein sources. In countries like France, the diet was heavily based on grains and breads, while in England and its holdings, the importance of the potato cannot be overstated. These were cheap sources of food with low value to mental development. What happens when you deny the human body protein and instead you have a diet of carbohydrates and other filler foods? Your mental sharpness declines. This is why cults and others immediately deny members protein to make you more controllable. Like school lunch programs. Many of you may feel like I'm making more of this topic than is warranted, but I assure you this is critical. Telling people to eat more protein sources by the government is a significant development, something for whom our fans of the public eating bugs will not be happy. The last thing they need is a more astute population because people are consuming healthy protein. The past is prologue among the powerful. There's an excellent TV series from Turkey who covers the history of the sultans of the Ottoman Empire. For fans of Dune, whether the books or the movies, you'll see many parallels to reference that fictional account of the future and the reality of Ottoman history. One of the important things about the Ottoman Empire, its history and its rules, is something many in the West do not know. Part of their legal system included that when a man assumed power as the Sultan, it was expected he would kill his brothers or anyone else considered to have a legal claim on the throne. It was the legalization of fratricide, and it began with Sultan Mehmed II. There was a very brutal and logical reason for this from their history. Recall prior programs where I've walked you through countries or kingdoms where stability is the only thing anyone cares about. Britain and Belgium are excellent examples of this in their colonies. Often a strong man oversaw some piece of real estate they controlled, and the leaders of those countries knew that person was brutal. Yet if that brutality kept things stable and trade continued without issue, then they let it happen. The old saying of that person may be a SOB, but there are SOB. Prior to Mehmed II's reign, when another sultan took power, their brothers, the other princes, launched a devastated civil war in the empire. The civil war fought over who really should have succeeded to the throne. It nearly destroyed the empire itself. To maintain stability, the practices of the Ottoman Empire made it legal for a new sultan to kill anyone who could claim the throne. As I said previously, it often meant killing members of their own family, including their own brothers. Equally, killing of these potential suitors to the throne required they be strangled to death. Why? Because they're still royal, and their blood should never touch the ground when they're killed. This is due to what was believed among fellow elites and religious officials. On one occasion, a new sultan, moments after being crowned, killed 19 of his brothers that same night. How were there so many suitors? Well, because of the royal harems and or wives, there were plenty of children. Even by the standard of that empire, the death of 19 family members in a single night was a bit too much for Ottoman society, and things were toned down a bit following. I have two takeaways on this historical reference. Think of events globally since New Year's, as well as the last 10 years, much less global history of the last 100 years. Stability, folks, stability. There must be stability. No matter how many countries are wiped out, no matter how many people die, the overall system must remain stable. Consider that statement. No matter how many countries are wiped out, there must be stability. In recent time, Libya has been overthrown. Syria just keeps getting kicked in the corner. Iraq isn't a serious country anymore. And the U.S. just popped into Caracas, Venezuela to remove that country's president. Never mind rumors about Iran and Greenland, much less carving up Canada. No matter how many people die. Have you seen what goes on in the Congo, my friends, or simply the world's worst bleeding wound right now, which is Gaza? The global community has imposed sanctions and currency controls on Iran, resulting in part of the reason for all the demonstrations in that country. Not a single measure has been adopted against Israel for Gaza, not one. The spice must flow and the system must remain stable. The second item concerns the little detail about royal suitors to the throne having to be strangled because their blood is precious and cannot touch the ground. Remember the line from Under the Silver Lake by the executive with his 3 brides. We're going to my tomb because it's something special and sacred for kings like me. There was a theme in that film about many kings in the world, including the character who was called the Homeless King. I said on a prior program among the world's elites, killing one of their own must be done a certain way and specifically. In the case of women, they must drown and men must be hung or strangled. Consider the following, folks, for there's a lot of rumors about their deaths where they were hung or strangled. These include Chester Bennington of the band Linkin Park, Chris Cornell, David Carradine, Kate Spade, the fashion designer, Anthony Bourdain, and the list goes on. What about famous women who have drowned in, of all places, their bathtubs? That would include Naya Rivera, the Glee actress who drowned in a lake, Whitney Houston in a bathtub, Sri Devi, a famous Indian actress who drowned in a bathtub in a Dubai hotel room, Dolores Reardon of the band The Cranberries, Naomi Pomeroy, a famous American chef and restaurateur. That's a lot of hangings and drownings of people rumored to have learned things they should not.
Mind the screen there, Veles.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
And look what's on there, though. She's actually drowning.
Yes, absolutely. And for those who know, if you ever find a very large image of the movie poster from Under the Silver Lake that Alga's got on the screen right now, if you zoom in on the bubbles, there's a whole bunch of things in there, including the image of a pirate, a guitar, and other things from the film, which in the many symbolisms of the film is an homage to everything from alcohol advertisements to other things. But we have to remember that these high-profile people are not allowed to die in a car accident unless that's the only choice they had, because the rules of the system say differently. A system who must remain stable no matter what. Patrick Ryan. In reply to a January 6th post by another person, Patrick offered some cryptic thoughts, and I'll explain. The post Patrick replied to stated, and I quote, "Maybe it's time for Europe to do the unthinkable, ally with China against the current regime in the US," unquote. Patrick's reply was, and I quote, "This was always in the cards. Who has the rightful claim of the gold held by the Federal Reserve and US Treasury? Who's building a sovereign first gold storage complex outside of BIS opaqueness? Who needs that gold as collateral for robotic infrastructure? According to some claims, based on geological data, Venezuela has more gold than the entire conquest chain dating back to the Cart of Darius, a hedge for the margin call. This was always the plan since 2014, end quote. So let's unpack Patrick's reply to the person's post about Europe and China. By the way, in my opinion, if something like that occurred in Europe, Europe would be heavily captive under a cooperation agreement with China or closer relations with China, who, to be candid for the Chinese, would be just fine given their history with Europe and the colonialism of the Europeans on China. Patrick's first item was his comment on who has the rightful claim of gold held by the Federal Reserve and Treasury. Officially, U.S. Treasury gold belongs to the U.S. government and is held for the government by the Treasury. Also along those lines, this is not a minor item. Technically, the Treasury is still holding all the gold U.S. citizens were obligated to turn in during the confiscation in 1933. I'm not sure there was an audit of how much that was, nor obviously have we had an audit of Fort Knox, much less any of our other deposit sites. The Federal Reserve, on the other hand, holds gold certificates who are claims on Treasury gold rather than physical gold. Patrick's commented about who's building a sovereign first gold storage complex outside of BIS. Well, the first thing is BIS, which stands for the Bank of International Settlements, who's often referenced as being the central bank for central banks. It's comprised of 63 central banks globally who represent 95% of global GDP. Shockingly, it's located in Switzerland, of course. So who's building a sovereign gold storage facility, per Patrick's comment, that's outside the authority of the BIS? Well, if it's who Patrick meant, that would be Kyrgyzstan, who launched their own gold storage facility in 2024, who can hold up to 1,000 tons of gold. At today's prices, that's roughly $140 billion of gold if that facility were full. This site is intended both for their gold storage, but also offering those services to foreign partners. Not sure what he had in mind relative to his comment about robotic infrastructure, at least at this time. Lastly, what is Venezuela's gold situation, both in official reserves and geologically? Officially, Venezuela has 161 tons of gold reserves, who total about $23 billion. However, Venezuela's central banks say they only have 53 tons of physical gold remaining because they depleted a lot of their reserves via sales to Turkey and other countries. We may want to double check what was aboard those oil tankers who were seized at sea. Are we sure it was oil? We need to keep in mind Venezuela has gold reserves who are frozen, specifically $1.5 billion worth via 31 tons that were frozen in London at the Bank of England, and we know who runs them. London froze those reserves because they never recognized Maduro as president. How many of us knew that little item? Lastly, and here's the biggie, how much gold does or may Venezuela have in the ground yet to be mined? Well, that is interesting, and my thanks to Patrick Ryan for making me go research it. Based on various mine estimates, the country of Venezuela has from a mid to high estimate range $1 to $1.5 trillion worth. Power projection. The Venezuela topic could be 3 shows worth of content. Now, after some time has passed, let's clear the air a bit. We cannot view Venezuela as a standalone event. I delved into this in a lengthy post on Discord back on Sunday, January 4th. This is my mantra about how you cannot understand JFK without understanding 1850 to today, inclusive of Cecil Rhodes, World War I, World War II, attempts on the lives of Gerald Ford and Ronald Reagan's lives, among a ton of other things over that 170 years. Venezuela is an event on a 200-year timeline. It's part of a conflict among apex elites of which we're trying to stay out from underfoot. Few global leaders on TV are anything but actors for people behind them who are far more powerful and far more in the shadows. What's different presently is this is not the traditional actions of one side takes out an asset or strikes one, a little while later the other side responds. It's almost like sparring sessions between friends, because that's what it usually is, regardless of all the innocent lives lost in the process. I'm not speaking figuratively either about the lives lost, as I was involved in human rights work for a time, including the forensic re-examination of the El Mozote massacre in El Salvador. This time is more personal, and that's why I feel both something has changed and another player is involved, or more involved than they were previously. The other player being the party I've mentioned before. I feel the Saudis are heavily involved in helping the U.S. push back the Lenin Corporation, as U.S. nationalists alone could not pull this off. I may be wrong in that hypothesis, but it's where I am at the moment. When I say the Saudis, I mean MBS specifically. In these latest series of moves, it's why shutting down laundering through both Ukraine and Venezuela are part of a connected plan. Loosely referencing the military strategy of MacArthur during World War II, I see something similar. MacArthur adopted a strategy of not taking on Japan and the Pacific at every island they held. He adopted an approach called island hopping, where certain islands were taken to cut off every Japanese position to the east of that point. It was very effective, as Japanese holdings on certain islands were isolated without supplies and withered without resources. So now consider a broader strategy than simply an emotional trope called Donald Trump did X. Because, as I'm fond of saying, it's not him. It's the people who are backing him. U.S. aid funds have been cut. Doge technically is still in operation, though the sources of funds were known before Doge became official, or at least were known in part. Ukraine's ability to launder money is nearly over. Venezuela is no longer laundering anyone's money at the level they were, and the list goes on and on. This is not just a series of tactical hits, folks. These are tactical hits as part of a long-term strategy by someone. That's why it's different, because a strategic plan is in play, not just we lobbed another English artillery shell into France from Dover to remind the Germans we're still here. That latter comment, by the way, is true. Along these lines, let's recall many a program, including Matthew Ehret's content about what the real story was during the U.S. war between the states, or Civil War. It was Britain's attempt to retake the United States for a third time since the War of 1812 and the Revolution. Who was the linchpin in that effort, though? It was the American colonists who lost in 1783 and migrated north to what we know in contemporary time as Canada. What has George Friedman said for years about U.S. foreign policy since the end of World War II? The United States is never trying to win a war. Winning wars is expensive and time and resource intensive. The U.S. is trying to make sure the other side doesn't win, and that's a subtle difference. The U.S. doesn't need to conquer Asia. We just arm Japan to the teeth instead. Same thing with countless U.S. military bases scattered all over the world. So then what to do about Canada? You do the same thing Russia did with their borders. You decimate Europe's toehold on your border in the form of Ukraine. What is the equivalent for the U.S. and forces opposing London? You revisit what nearly went down between the U.S. and Canada in the early 1990s. We pull 1 to 2 of Canada's western provinces into the United States as protectorates and carve up a chunk of Canada. While everyone thinks the U.S. is pursuing Greenland, and we may be, the U.S. is instead pursuing a chunk of Western Canada, who, as luck has it, possesses oil. In fact, easier for us to refine than that junk out of Venezuela. That's a fascinating coincidence. Beyond the sorts of things we've said on ESW Rogue, what is a common truth about Oklahoma City in 1995 and the September attacks in 2001? Quite a few researchers have said all the evidence of wrongdoing by the Clintons was being stockpiled in the federal building in Oklahoma City. Keep in mind, it wasn't just the Clintons, even if that's what the investigators may have believed. Those matters also involved the Nugan Hand Bank, BCCI, and a host of other intelligence and related parties where the Clintons were public relations of what was going on behind the scenes. Whitewater investigations were distractions compared to the reality. As confirmed by Mike Moore, federal investigators took immense personal and professional risks being involved in such an investigation which for them was on par with Watergate or bigger. Right when they were ready to move forward, the building was destroyed along with all their evidence. Let's not forget either, any chance of some evidence being recovered was lost because the entire building was demolished before the bombing investigation had even started. Said loosely, the federal investigation in question had discovered there were multiple layers and octopus arms to the whole operation before evidence was destroyed. Moving right along, not only did Building 7 of the World Trade Center complex not hang itself, but it was the building where federal financial and regulatory work took place. Per George Webb, the kind of investigative capability who discovered what Enron was up to was nearly gone following the building's destruction. Question who's not been asked, to my knowledge, is what potential investigations were ongoing in that building prior to its destruction? Were such potential investigations on par with what eliminated the federal building in Oklahoma? We do know the outcome across many federal agencies following 9/11. They became obsessed with terrorism and funding to fight terrorism. Financial crimes and large criminal networks did not garner the attention they once did, and certainly not the funding. A classmate of mine resigned from the FBI following 9/11 because, in his words, within 30 days of the attacks, the agency was focused on surveillance and not criminal investigation. Unquote. The area of the Pentagon it was struck had recently been remodeled. It was the home of financial investigation into the famous Don Rumsfeld comment. For clarity's sake, what Don Rumsfeld said was 2.3 trillion of Pentagon spending could not be tracked. He didn't say it was missing, though one could interpret that statement in several ways. The point is, the investigation into Pentagon account practices had already been ongoing before he made those statements on September 10th, the day before the attacks. From recent media statements, we know the Pentagon still cannot provide an approved audit of its finances. We don't know what specific evidence, such as documentation or digital records, were destroyed at each site I've mentioned. We know enough, though, about investigations who preceded the destructions of those sites. Final comment. In 1982, while watching Siskel and Ebert's movie reviews, they discussed a film they considered one of the most creative they'd ever seen. It was called Koyaanisqatsi, who is a Hopi Indian word meaning life out of balance. Because it's me, at around the age of 13, I hopped on my bike and rode to a local theater who used to show art films and similar. The turtleneck and sport jacket crowd, if you will. As usual, most people in the theater from local universities wondered who the kid was sitting with his soda. It's a very surreal film, and I've seen it several times. As I'm a bit older now, it's one of those moments in life where you suspect the universe was foreshadowing and you just didn't quite get the message until now. There's a theme out there among several alternative commentators who loosely said, why do things seem out of balance right now? Why do things seem like they're falling apart? In a dinner conversation recently, some listeners raised related concerns about things today. My reply was, but that's the challenge. It's not just today. All these same groups and objectives were ongoing throughout our lives and how long we've been on this earth, which is 1970 through to this day. We didn't see them as clearly as we do now, and there are many factors why. Not sure which is more heartburn. The fact that this has been the case for more than 500 years, or the fact our visibility has become very sharp in the last 10 to 20 years. This aligns with my comments earlier about the degree our content on ESW Rogue can unsettle people at times. Stay focused on your goals, folks, and use what we and others provide to keep yourself on your path. There's a Christian concept about how the true meaning of God's revelation is not something we understand until it is upon us. Well, from a certain perspective, it's upon us. I yield the floor, Algo.
It was so funny. There's a couple of things you were saying, and I'm like writing stuff down, and then you covered it.
Glad to be on target.
Yeah, on target, over the target, catching the flack. E.T., I remember Reese's Pieces was probably their biggest product placement. And given my age, E.T. was like, I was a kid when it came out. In fact, when it came out, I think it was like 1982. But of course, I saw it 2 years later as a kid who could remember it. I was alive when it came out. But long story short, that was an interesting movie for a lot of reasons. A lot of the themes in there, telepathy. Obviously, there's the alien aspect. But I remember Coca-Cola. I think when he got drunk, the kid was drinking a beer out of the fridge. It was E.T. drinking the beer. I think it was Budweiser. Yeah, definitely remember the product placement. But Reese's Pieces was the one that they really... my mom was telling me, because I'm too young to remember, she says, yeah, Reese's Pieces wasn't even really that popular until E.T., and then it just blew up huge.
Correct. They also... it was also Coca-Cola and Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut.
A lot of focus on the box and stuff when the kids were eating, talking to ET. Yeah, there was a whole host of products.
Yeah, and that's where you learned you can take your thermometer and put it up to the light, to tell you, make it look like you're sick. Great movie. The Food Pyramid. Oh man, there's a lot there, but to keep it really simple, my wife's a nutritionist, and she, among many things, she's a microbiologist and all kinds of stuff. She's smart. And it's really simple, just like a plate with about a handful of meat on it and at least half the plate full of vegetables. Like if you kind of stick to that rule in general, you're going to do well. There are those who believe that the carnivore diet is good. They're experimenting with that, but vegetables have a lot of phytonutrients in it. So there's always these new fads, but it kind of seems like the best diet is what wisdom has taught us forever. I was with my barber, getting my haircut, this like a month ago. He's from Bulgaria, which is close to where my wife's family is from. They're from Serbia and Croatia, and he was saying that growing up, he was, for some reason he had the impression that wealthy people ate bread. I said, no, bread's for the poor people,
right?
And he kind of thought about it. He goes, you know what? Now that you say that, you're right. Bread is for the poor. I'm like, yeah, that's not. So yeah, think about that. Grains are not ideal. We all love bread. My kids love bread, but yeah, no bueno. And by the way, last comment on bread. My mother-in-law has been in this country since the 70s, and the Serbs, man, it's like bread with every meal. Very European in general. Right. There's always bread. And her mother came over around 2010, God rest her soul. And so this would have been my grandmother-in-law, and she passed a few months before I met my wife. So my mother-in-law was trying to convince her mother to go get the live scan where they take a look at your arteries, right?
Yeah.
And, being from the old country, I mean, this is like old, she's wearing the babushka and everything. That's how far back she kind of goes culturally. And so, she was afraid of the live scan. And so my mother-in-law said, okay, I'll go with you. I'll get the live scan and you can see what it is, right? So she goes. Mother-in-law is totally fine. Eats bread every day in Europe, had been in this country for a year or two. My mother-in-law, that was her mother, right? No problem. Right. My mother-in-law being here in the US eating bread every day, had one of her arteries was clogged like 80%, and they saved her life. So whatever they're putting in the bread in the US is killing us. And I've heard a lot of different stories about people in Europe and their food, and it's just way healthier. Look, Europe does not do everything correct, but at least they got that part right. At least in most countries, although I hear it's starting to head their way as well as far as the unhealthy food. So that's enough about food.
Yeah, and there's those who also believe that the gluten intolerance is not really due to gluten per se. It's what's going into the bread, because many folks have. Because as I've shared with the audience, I've been in and out of Europe a bunch of times this, like literally the last 12, 15 months. And every time I eat European foods, I feel better. People I know often talk about how much weight they lose eating European foods. Plus, let's be candid, the other aspect is you're walking around more, and you're probably hydrating better. It's just, but yes, you have to be exceedingly cautious about foods here in the United States.
Well, yeah, I spent a month in Sicily, but it's probably closer to 3 weeks. And when I went at that time, I was living very unhealthy. Bachelor. I was working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It was brutal. And I went to Italy for like 3 weeks. I came back entire like way more healthy. I've experienced it myself. Venezuela. This is something I've told people for a long time. Long before the whole most recent things have happened with Venezuela. Right. It's about 20 years ago. I was tutoring a Korean kid in English, and he was at the naval school in Oceanside, California. I think it was Oceanside. And so, he was like, 14 or something. And long story short, it's a long story how I got the job. It's just there's somebody I knew. And I remember they were sitting in the library. He didn't speak any English, so the whole idea was just to speak English with him. It wasn't, and he was showing me his schoolwork that they gave him at the naval school. And in there was a map, and it was a map of the world. And all the countries were not labeled except for a handful. Mm-hmm. Those handful of countries labeled were Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya. And then there's this one country in the Western Hemisphere is Venezuela. That's it. And then, U.S. was labeled. And so the entire South American continent was like blank except for Venezuela. Like, why are they teaching these young kids at the naval school to only pay attention to these certain countries? Should tell you a lot. The last bit is Rumsfeld. Catherine Austin Fitts. I know everybody, at least in our community, gives her a hard time for talking about the underground bases, and she's gone a little in that direction, but she's a smart lady, and I haven't listened to her lately, but I've listened to a fair amount of her stuff. And look, just like say with Tom Luongo, and you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. These people do a lot of good research, and we're in this it's another topic altogether, but we're in this thing where, the Bible said this one thing that wasn't true, so none of it must be true. Like, we're in this weird time when there's a lot of vitriol being thrown at people just because they got one thing wrong, but they have like this entire, treasure trove of really good information that we just ignore because they said one silly thing. And it's a very polarized way to look at anything. And so I really advise people to just, take a step back, take your feelings and maybe put them down a little bit, take a look at the facts, judge them on each of their merits, right? Because the facts don't care about your feelings. Stop acting like Democrats, from 2020. It's time to grow up, people. And part of that growing up is listening to people like, say, Tom Luongo, when he talks about the financial aspect of things that he follows very well, in my opinion. And another that is with Catherine Austin Fitts, in that it wasn't 2 trillion, but it was like 10 trillion in reality. And she thinks might be closer to 20. And around this time, it's FASB 5.6 was the law that got put into place where public accounting of public funds. So like money is taken in through taxes, tariffs, and everything else. that was allowed to be like hidden from the public from a law called FASB 56. And it wasn't long after that we started missing trillions of dollars, and the part of the Pentagon that was investigating that ended up getting blown up by a plane that we never saw parts for after the explosion, and so on and so forth. Right. So, yeah, a lot of things. But anyway, that's all I got, Veles. I just wanted to put out that bit about, I wanted to emphasize that just because you may not like something that somebody says doesn't mean they're always wrong. That's a really important thing to take a look at. And I don't know, man. I think people are just getting too emotional these days. It's the old saying.
Perhaps by design as well. And to your point about not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, that's another reason why I brought up the thing about Eric von Daniken, because even people that are in the quote unquote alternative, and that's a wide statement when I say alternative, but alternative history, alternative anthropology world, even folks in that world were like, oh God, von Daniken. It's like, look, the things he said, the things he did in the 1970s, nobody outside of the occasional book, nobody had gone there. And he put out a lot of content, asked a lot of very thoughtful questions. But like I said, twice, I've literally heard the man speak to people where he will list the things he got off, things he got wrong, but why he modified his theories and similar. And when you're in academia or similar, unfortunately, you can't do that, because it's like, well, now we got to let you go as a professor because some of your content was incorrect. So it's the same thing with a lot of folks in the alternative community. And I know V often uses the reference, we're reading other people's mail. Unless you're out there doing firsthand research and acquiring firsthand data, which there are folks who do that. But the challenge, and I brought this up before, is when you're that type of researcher, you roll in once with a really amazing, mind-blowing, coverage of a topic, and then you're gone again for 6 months because you're out there looking for stuff, and people, candidly forget. So it's one of the challenges we have in what we do outside of Veles filing for a FOIA. By the way, for all of you living in the Great Lakes right now, I know that you're dealing with incredible winds and blizzard-like conditions. So hang on and, make yourself some warm coffee to get through the day.
Yeah, that's and out here where I live, it's actually warm. It was warm and wet, and now it's warm and dry. We haven't had rain in some time, and anybody living in the Idaho area, which is like 2 people and their dog, if you look at, actually, there's a million people in Treasure Valley. But long story short, we're concerned about drought conditions, and the locals like. Talk to people who've lived in your area for a very long time if you want to know how stuff really goes, because there's people out here. My wife was talking to somebody, and she's like, yeah, she goes, I was at the library and the librarian was talking to my mom, and they've been here for a long time, and they're talking about droughts that happened maybe 10 years ago because there wasn't enough water because a lot of people moved into the area, and the population has gone up by like twice by that. And people just don't seem to understand that we could be headed for a drought right now, and nobody's talking about it. So yeah, it's the people who've been in an area for a long time, they're really interesting to talk to. I'll leave it there. Veles, amazing show. Any closing thoughts?
No, just stay well, everybody, and don't get too worked up about things that are going on. I know that's hard to internalize sometimes, but you've got this. You got this far in life, folks. You know what you're doing, and I'll hopefully see you folks in February.
Yeah, I have to repeat that. Like, I've been through a fair amount of things in life. Everybody has their own story, and there's no reason to share it here. But I will say that there aren't a lot of things at this point that get me very riled up, and I don't know if that's like a personal problem or if it's just what I've dealt with in life. But I will say that I notice that when people get really upset, that's when mistakes get made. Right?
Yes.
And so when I see people yelling at each other, whether it's people I know or don't know, or it's just like the vitriol is not productive.
It's if I may for just a second, it's one of the reasons, folks, why, and I felt like an idiot when I finally realized this. It's one of the reasons why, with military academies, West Point, Annapolis, VMI, the Air Force Academy, and similar, why there's this process, and these are future officers, why there's that, for lack of a better word, a hazing period for the first half of their freshman year, where just you're constantly getting messed with. Now, not physical, because that's illegal now. It used to be, but it's more psychological. But just everything you do is wrong. This is no joke. You've got study in the bathrooms, because that's the only place that has light at night, because they turn off the lights in the rest of the residence halls. You got to get real creative about finding solutions, etc. That's by design, because at a subconscious level, they're trying to get you conditioned to dealing with disruptive events, because that's what combat is. The same way that you see all these videos and stuff about young men and women dropped off at Parris Island or similar for Marine training, or the way the drill instructors are constantly coming after people. They can't have you break down in a high stress situation. And that, quite frankly, even goes for if you're helping National Guard people during a disaster. You got to be able to keep your head under high stress situations. That's why that is all done that way.
Yeah, the old Zen thing about you can't see your reflection in boiling water, right? Once the water calms down, you can see your reflection. And the minute that we all get upset, we're all human, it happens. But if you have like this sustained period of being mad about everything, then that's as far as I'm concerned, an operation's been run on you, or you have a psychological problem.
Which is also why a massive oversimplification, folks. Why they don't need TV anymore alone to throw you off, throw your day off. You're carrying around every day the device, and there are certain among us, who go nameless. There are certain among us in society who are on that phone 24/7.
Yeah,
and it's not just the text messages. It's the folks, forgive me. Why do we now have so many pop-ups, no longer just on your home computer, but even on your cell phone? Like, I'm battling them myself, where it's like, hi, Veles, this is Uber again. Would you like to? It's like, I'd like you to stop bugging me is what I'd like you to do. I'm in the middle of talking to Algo right now. Go away. Leave me alone.
Yeah, we are in the distraction world, and it's how many times have you picked up your phone and all of a sudden realized that 15 minutes went by because you saw a notification and then you looked and then it took you down the path of doom scrolling. I'm off Twitter, not by choice. And ever since I was off Twitter, I've been way more productive. So you really have to, just have to stay, like I said, stay focused. That was like the last segment that you had there was stay focused. And above all, I'd say stay calm. One thing that we're talking to a lot of people about right now, Veles and I in particular, is that it isn't that everything we're dealing with is new. It's that it's always been like this, but now we have the internet. Like, I don't think the corruption is new, the money laundering, the high everything, the Epstein stuff, like that's all, I think that's ages old. And I think the only real difference is that we have the internet now. And there are some people who can deal with it, and there are some people who cannot. And if you cannot deal with it, you're going to find yourself, number one, you're going to be very upset. Number two, you're going to be not productive. So
it's also, folks, keep in mind, it's the use of the internet, the use of the technologies that we're talking about. It's like everything else in life. They can be used for good or ill. And so it's a tool. We always have to keep, it's like when people get upset about the topic of firearms. It's a tool. How you use it is up to you. And you can't let, sounds silly, but you can't let the tool run your life. And that's kind of the challenge here is, are you just a pinball going through various texts and postings on your phone? Or are you using it constructively with very strong boundaries? One of the old business tools or approaches that's been used for a very long time, especially in very high stress industries that I've been in and others have had to manage, especially in the legal community or senior executives, corporations, is there's 2 or 3 hours of your day. And the way you do this is you don't read email, period. You like literally turn it off so you don't even see the little ding come up or the message reminder about certain things on your calendar. And you have an away message during those periods of time in your day that says, during this period of time, I will not be reviewing emails. If you absolutely positively need to get a hold of me, send me a text message or call me. And that's a very, very constructive and helpful thing to do. I had an executive I knew that worked for LexisNexis that at a conference I attended said that he was receiving between 200 to 400 emails a day, which at the time I thought was insane until I worked a job where I had almost that many emails a day. So he had various techniques for managing all that workload. But truth and reality, folks, you're all getting distracted 200 or 300 times a day. It's the subtle advertisements being used. It's the fact that, yes, it's not a joke. Your phone is listening to you, and it is sending advertisements and targeted things to you, as well as the various pop-ups, ads, and similar. So you've got to develop a model for yourself on how to manage that. Those distractions will be there, but you've got to figure out for yourself methods and things you can use to manage that.
Well, yeah, my phone and computer are on do not disturb all the time. They're never not.
No wonder I can't find you.
Well, there are a select few people who are allowed through that net, right? I get no less than, I don't know. I mean, my Telegram always muted. There's like the same thing. All the like Discord, Telegram, that stuff's all muted. If it wasn't, my phone would just be ding, 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 ding all day long. You know, there's you have to manage that. But the occult, which means hidden, as you covered earlier, and I know a fair amount about the occult. The whole concept is like you want to not be polarized, right? For certain kinds of stuff. For certain kind of occult practices, the whole idea is to become depolarized, but not completely depolarized. If you're just completely depolarized, you don't care about anything, and that's not healthy. But the more polarized you are, the more you can be pushed around. And so if you find yourself incensed about a topic, then you've been polarized, and that it's really easy to distract you from whatever that is. Because in this world, you'll find if you're just pissed off about whatever happened in Venezuela, how much of your day are you scrolling about Venezuela? You know, if you're pissed off about Epstein and you're looking at X and you're looking at this about Epstein, it's going to throw more Epstein at you. And that's commercial. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that Elon wants to distract you because he's part of the world order. I think it's more like selling advertisements as much as it is anything else. And think what you want. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. But long story short, you do like there, and I'm not going to, I need to research what I'm about to talk about a little bit more before I bring it up. Nietzsche, who is very misunderstood.
Yes.
Talks about, or Carl Jung, actually, not Nietzsche. It's Carl Jung, who is also misunderstood. Talks about the unconscious, right? And unconscious means not that you're like knocked out and you can't, you know, like, no one hits you with a frying pan. Unconscious means that there are things that you do involuntarily. Yes. And a lot of people live this way. They go through life. Like I said, you look at your phone and you click you saw the little red notification. Before you know it, you've doom scrolled for like 30 minutes. It's not even that you actively said, hey, I'm going to go doom scroll for 30 minutes. It's just that's what you did. So, we're in a time when we haven't gotten used to the new disease of the cell phones. We haven't evolved. We haven't developed our antibodies to these distractions. Somebody like me is a little bit better about it, but I find myself often in that position. And I didn't know how bad it was until I got banned on X. Well, holy crap. I'm like doing all I'm productive now. I cannot stress enough. You have to stay calm. You have to read these events as this shit was probably going on for decades, if not centuries, before you were born, and they're going to go on for decades and centuries after you born. And this idea of peace on earth for everybody, yeah, that's bullshit. It ain't never happening. Not until, if you're religious, then you're waiting for Christ to come before you see that again. So
but don't worry, the aliens are landing on the White House lawn and they're going to save us all.
The Jehovah's Witnesses believe that like there will be a message from the UN that says everything is safe and secure, and that's when everything's about to go ape shit.
By the way, folks, sidebar on our overall coverage today. On X this morning, I noticed there's a content provider that has popped up on X called Rise of Alberta, which is a reference to the province of Alberta in Canada, accelerating Alberta's journey toward independence. And Alberta has a choice. It's a turning point in history, an unprecedented opportunity to carve out our own path and build real prosperity for every Albertan. And of course, all of the people speaking to you in the little window below are, of course, all AI generated. But it's a very slick post. And if certain parties in the United States are not responsible for this, I would be shocked. This is not organic, but people living in Alberta. So yeah, this is the world we're living in.
Shocked, I tell you.
Shocked.
All right. Well, Veles, thank you for being here as always. Glad we can make time. So there are going to be more shows like this, everybody, that are pre-recorded. A lot of it has to do with just people and their availability, and also there are other aspects as well. We need Rogue to grow. We need ESW Rogue to grow. V and I talk about this from time to time. Like, we're the only people that really have something left that's real to offer. We have a lot of people in our space who are selling something, or there's a grift going on, and the longer time goes, the more we see people divert away from the path, and they're having something to sell is not a bad thing. I have something to sell, but it comes down to, is that real, right? So if you're selling JFK Jr. still alive, and Barron Trump's dog has a time machine, and that's your crowd, well, we're seeing people going down those kinds of roads anymore. So but yeah, thank you all for watching. Veles, thank you very much for coming on, and we will be back next week.